Welcome to the Florida Alliance for Arts Education webinar. Our topic is the 21st Century Partnership Skills Map for the Arts. The 21st Century Partnership published this skills map in July of 2010, and MENC was instrumental in developing the skills map and in bringing together a coalition of arts organizations in the development of that skills map. Michael Blakesley, who is the Senior Executive Director and Chief Operations Officer for MENC, is here with us today to explain a little bit about the partnership and go into some detail about the skills map for the arts. So I'm going to turn it over to Michael. Thank you.
Now, the partnership is made up of a host of organizations and businesses. As you see in this screen here, there are businesses like Lego that are involved in learning toys. There's McGraw-Hill Education, National Education Association, a bunch of sort of high-tech companies, Microsoft, Oracle, Pearson, Sun, but also ASCD was one of their members and connected us with Ken Kay, the head of the partnership at that time. And so we put together a coalition that for us is an informal coalition, but an old coalition of organizations, essentially the organizations that 16 years ago wrote the national standards. And so we got that together to try and get involved in this. Now, we got involved because the Partnership for 21st Century Skills, with all these, frankly, pretty powerful organizations, is spearheading the idea that education should prepare kids for life in the 21st century. Now, they do this by proposing this thing that you see on your screen as the key elements. The sort of rainbow, as they call it up top, are the student outcomes they're looking for. They want kids, as I think we all do, to have competency in core subjects. They want them to have life and career skills. They want them to have learning and innovation skills, and also skills in dealing with information, media, and technology. The little pools that they call them below there are the support systems. So in order to achieve all this with kids, you have standards in assessment. And as I said, MENC and our colleagues in the other arts were involved. Actually, we were the ones who wrote the national standards on which the Florida standards, among standards in other states, are largely based. You need good curriculum and instruction. You need professional development for teachers, and you need strong and productive learning environments for the kids to work. So, to their credit, the partnership has always, in listing core subjects, listed the ones you see in front of you: English, reading and language arts, world languages, and the arts. So they have not, as some groups unfortunately have done in the past, kind of given short shrift to the arts. They have always recognized that they are core to teaching and learning 21st century skills. Now, when they list those subjects, the partnership also says that you've got to focus on some interdisciplinary themes. So the ones that they've identified, and actually these have changed over time in the partnership's lineup, but the ones that they use now are global awareness, financial, economic, business, and entrepreneurial literacy, civic literacy, health literacy, and environmental literacy. Now, this is important because when we did this skills map that I'm going to introduce to you, we looked not only at a series of 21st century skills identified, but at these interdisciplinary themes. Now, the central part of what the partnership proposes to educators and decision makers nationwide is that you've got to, in education, teach kids the classic 3 R's, but even more importantly, perhaps, in the 21st century, you have to teach what they call the 4 C's. First one being critical thinking and problem solving, then communication, then collaboration, and finally creativity and innovation. So there are actually in all a set of, I think, 13 skills, but these are the 4 ones that they see are most important. By the way, a little sort of wrinkle that we introduced when we did the arts skills map that I'll introduce in a little bit, we actually split up creativity and innovation into 2 separate categories because we feel that's so central to what we do in teaching the arts. Well, when you teach these skills, you need to have all of these other elements that I mentioned in the little pools in their diagram. So we have also, and I'll mention this in a little bit more detail later, we have also tried to delve in to try and say, you know, what's necessary if you agree that you're going to teach these 4 C's and these other skills? What are the necessary elements that you have to have for all kids to reach? Now, that's very similar to a lot of you who followed this, the standards when we did them 16 years ago. Will recall that simultaneous with the release of the National Standards for Arts Education in the 4 what we call the canonical arts, that's music, dance, theater, and the visual arts. Simultaneous with that, we released what we called Opportunity to Learn standards, saying if the standards, and as you all probably recall, the standards say what kids should know and be able to do in each discipline, if kids are going to have half a chance of reaching those standards, they've got to have some sort of support. So they've got to have adequate instructors, they've got to have a place to learn, they've got to have the appropriate equipment, the appropriate software. So we've delved into that too. Now, here to sort of compare once again and to draw the parallel and sort of make a little distinction between the standards and these 4 C's of 21st century learning skills. The standards, in music, for example, there are 9 standards. Singing and playing, composition, improvisation, understanding the cultural and historical context of music. There are, as I said, 9. But when we worked on the standards in terms of trying to turn them into an evaluative instrument in the National Assessment of Educational Progress, we came up with really 3 broad categories: creating, performing, and responding. So any arts teacher, any music teacher or teacher in the other arts, basically thinks of developing curriculum and interfacing with kids in terms of teaching these 3 broad categories. I want to have a kid in music to have skill in, first of all, performing, maybe playing in an ensemble. I also want them to be able to respond to music intelligently, to be able to listen to a piece and figure out something about, was that performance good or bad? What period did it come from? What's going on technically in the piece? And increasingly, we want kids in the arts and music to be able to do their own creation. Well, in the Partnership for 21st Century Learning Skills, these 4 C's are sort of parallel to that, but if you think about it, they're broader categories of learning that are not just particular to the arts, but are kind of what the community as a whole wants for kids. So if you run up to the average person on the street and you pick, say, a music standard, there's a music standard for the fact that by grade 8 we want all kids in an ensemble to be able to play music at a level of approximately 3 on a 6-point scale. Well, that's a wonderful, wonderful standard for music teaching professionals to know, but quite frankly, it doesn't say as much to the average member of the public. But if you say, we want to teach music, we want to teach visual art, we want to teach dance, we want to teach theater, so that our kids are going to graduate being able to do critical thinking and problem solving, communication, collaboration, and be creative and innovative, those members of the public will very well understand what you're talking about. Well, so in order to drill down to what all this means in terms of the various curricula around which our schools are in fact designed, the Partnership for 21st Century Skills started doing what they call skills maps. And they did them in social studies, in English, in science, and in geography. Then we did ours in the arts, and there's one that is under development and I think just on the point of being released in language arts. Now, each of these skills maps, with the exception of language arts, and there's a slight difference on that, is divided into the same sort of outcome levels that we had in the standards. That is, there are outcomes proposed for grades 4, 8, and 12. Obviously, that doesn't mean that you don't forget about them in grades 5 and 6 or 2 and 3. It just means that we're proposing these as sort of benchmarks or outcomes of what should happen there. In language arts, because of the way language arts is normally taught in the schools, that group decided to, instead of pitching it to particular grade levels, to say just beginning, intermediate, and advanced levels, but same sort of idea. Now, the maps are designed to raise awareness about the way our core subjects reach or help students reach these 21st century skills. Because it's one thing to merely say we want kids to be creative, but I think for the average decision maker or parent, or for that matter teacher, it helps to have some examples to try and elucidate what's going on. So because of that, we wrote an arts content map. Now, the arts content map, let me just read you a tiny bit from the introduction of that. It says, anyone who has ever seen a student become excited, energized, and confident through artistic exploration has seen firsthand how arts education engages children and contributes to their overall development. So just thinking of that for a little bit, that's setting the stage. We're trying to say that we collected an arts content map which is basically a collection of little vignettes, of little examples that show how in a real classroom the various 21st century skills can be arrived at through teaching in the arts. So involved in preparing it, we had, as I said earlier, basically the same organizations that 16 years ago wrote the national standards for the arts. For music, it was us at MENC. For the visual arts, it's our friends at NAEA, the National Association for Education in the Arts. For theater, there were two, American Alliance for Theater and Education and Educational Theater Association. And for dance, the National Dance Association and the National Dance Education Organization. Well, we put together a draft of the map, we put it up on the website, and we got 155 respondents digging in and telling us what they liked and what they didn't like, both from individuals and from other organizations. We took all that response very seriously and then worked with the partnership to try and come up with a final map. Well, here's basically what it looks like.